Today, I'm going to talk about how I came to do this work and pose some questions about the influence of the arts on body mapping and digital storytelling, and talk about what those methods are, and have a discussion. Hopefully, we can have more of a discussion than presentations. And so there's some extra slides that I might skip, but you can come back to. And I'm happy to share any resources with anyone who has specific questions for your research. Um, so in 1989, this was me, my mom's business. She had a clothing business at home, and we would dance to the music while trying on some clothes, as you do, right? But as you might notice, I'm kind of thin. Like I wasn't well as a child. I had a problem with my kidney, and I was interested in Inspector Gadget, very curious about things, and always drawing. I was interested to draw the fashion models that I saw with my mom's clothes, and they so it turned out that like the kidney issue I had, it was very short term, and I was briefly hospitalized, but the urologist took a clipboard and showed me what was wrong with my kidneys and that I had a short urethra. So the urethra is the two top shapes are the kidney in this diagram, and the urethra is like a tube that connects the kidney to your bladder and then goes through that system. And mine was shorter, so there was a infection, and a very serious infection, and my white cell count was 1.4, and I think it's usually over 5, or 500, one of those numbers. Anywho, it was challenging for about a year, and then I grew. So actually I was going to have this surgery for it, and it grew, so everything was fine. Um, but I was struck by the drawing that the urologist created, and just a very simple drawing. And I think I've always thought back to that as a researcher, and like my own experience and what health communication and the impact of that on people's communication of health. And so I eventually came back to body mapping. But as you know, in March 2020, everyone's work stopped, and I was teaching at the time, but ended up taking a digital storytelling class. And I started a business. Dr. Oni Blackstock messaged me on Twitter and said, "Any chance you're able to design logos?" And I was like, "Yes, I love doing that." And did some design work for her, and did some design, emergency level design for Indigenous Health Center at Women's College Hospital, and to create messaging around the vaccine and the importance of taking it, because at the time there was around 20 to 50% of interest in taking the vaccine amongst Indigenous peoples, and the campaign was to encourage people to have informed decisions. And so I continued teaching a bit of both digital storytelling, body mapping, and other arts-based qualitative methods with undergraduate and graduate students in OCAD at University in Waterloo, University of Waterloo. And then in January 2022, Dr. Brooke Hessler from the California College of Arts and I connected and through email from that workshop in 2020, and talked about teaching graduate students how to use digital stories to talk about their positionality in their research, or what's known as like how you know and understand the world, and how knowledge is produced through research. And my question for graduate students is like, if you know like your interests and your positions in research, if you want to do objective research, subjective research, at least you know that, so that you can make informed decisions about your practice. And we try to use an arts-based work to teach students how to communicate that, and how to say, this is who I am. So you know, you're doing meaningful work. And so that's kind of the current work. I'm still doing a bit of that with Dr. Hessler. Today, again, I was thinking of what's the influence of the arts on body mapping and digital storytelling research and practice. And some other questions are, what are expressive techniques and tools that the arts offer for body mapping and digital storytelling researchers and practitioners to employ? The methods have been around for approximately like 20 to 30 years. And only in the last 10 to 15 years, they've been published in like scholarly literature as research methods. Only body mapping was determined as a research method in 2020. So sort of new in a way, like there's a lot of possibility to contribute. And I think that there's a lot of possibility with the arts to expand on the practice rather than with a simple list of paint and paper and so on. And so then that makes me wonder, what is the future of these arts-based methods and what's the next step? Um, Briefly about my PhD, just to understand my perspective is before the pandemic, interviewed 35 people in 11 countries on Skype about what makes a great story and showed them stories by youth formerly in foster care and asked them questions about storytelling. And I got a range of perspectives, and that map showed where they were from and where we were calling in. And this is my study design diagram. I proposed to interview digital storytelling facilitators, fine arts professionals, health and social service professionals, and then a fifth group emerged through snowball sampling. So someone saying, "Oh, I know who you could speak to," and here they are. And so then I contacted them, and they turned out to be arts and health researchers. So they're doing a bit of both art and health. And I decided to do knowledge translation, planning, and dissemination with my analysis. So created around 7 multimodal outputs about the findings that were emerging, and then doing your PhD is quite a long process, and mine took 8 years. But seeing the big picture like this helped me understand like this milestone is done. I can go into the next one and keep going. um, and I use video elicitation, semi-structured interviewing, naturalistic observations. This is a participant in Brazil who wanted to take a picture with me, and yeah, sure. um, and interview guide. So I asked them in the third question, what makes a great story? But the other questions are designed around experience, value, audience, um, and who can see stories. So I'm starting to think about disseminating that work as a paper, but I just haven't, starting a new position and haven't had the chance to get into that. My literature review was on arts, museums, interactive, multisensory, web-based digital storytelling. The references are, if you're familiar with them, it was really um, for reference, and then physical and mental health, health equity, in healthcare, digital storytelling about those topics. And then the education and digital storytelling literature that was present at the time was about science and climate action, social justice, and facilitator education. And audience is extremely important in storytelling, and even in body mapping is you'll probably understand it's a bit of a way to tell a story about your life experience. So what is body mapping? Um, the way I've just defined it is a form of navigation of life experience involving the body. It's a research method that enables participants to explore thoughts, sensations, pain, and emotions in and around the body on paper or in a digital format. And it's therapeutic arts intervention that first was practiced in 1985 by Carol McCormack. I think it's another author, Draper is her last name, to help women in Jamaica improve communication about gynecological concerns and health needs. Um, and then later, a graphic and textile artist, Jane Solomon, was the first to do body mapping with Jonathan Morgan, a psychologist in rural South Africa and Zimbabwe, to understand the embodied experience of entire body. So, and from there, the literature has grown quite a lot, really since 2016. I co-authored a paper with Adele de Jager, Anna Tucson, and Catherine Boydell at University of New South Wales on a systematic review of body mapping. And since then, people have used that work to discuss their work in body mapping, and so it's been hard to follow because there's been so much on the images on the right center is images from a body mapping workshop that I did in Toronto with the Creative Work Studio with the, female identified artists and who were outpatients of St. Michael's Hospital. And the body mapping timeline on the bottom is until 2012. I identified like various approaches to body mapping and how to facilitate it, and really depends on the research question you have. I think so. If you're working in biomedical science, you might be interested more in a physiological approach. Experiential approaches came out of the HIV/AIDS movement and working with people living with HIV/AIDS to map how their emotions and experiences of living with AIDS and HIV and keeping track of their symptoms. A psychosocial approach is still quite emerging. Like there's not a lot of work in the psychosocial approach. As you can imagine, it involves greater resources. So if you're an arts-based facilitator, you may work with a social worker or a psychologist, psychiatrist to help you cope with themselves, but they've theorized on how embodiment theory, for example, has impacted the method. So body map may be confusing or unclear, but what I like to think about is a map can be defined as any scheme that spells out one-to-one correspondence between two different things, like this definition by Blakeslee and Blakeslee. It's a great book. It's about body mapping and sensory motor perception and body language. And so a map is, we think back to the image I showed of the kidney diagram, so it's too short and the other one is this long. So you can see that we're gonna try and help you fix that. I ended up fixing myself, I guess. It like, grew out of it. Do you want me to draw is another question. Like people will say, oh, I'm not an artist, or I'm not good at art, or I've been told that I'm not great at art, or I can't really draw well. But this presentation by Graham Shaw on TEDx, Why People Believe They Can't Draw, really shows that anyone can draw. Like he shows you how to do it, and really positive tests. And I was watching a TV show the other night, Call the Midwife, and if anyone watched it, and they were learning how to drive. One person was learning how to drive, and her husband was trying to teach her how to drive. And when you know someone really well and they're trying to teach you something, sometimes you can't really learn how to do it. So then she ended up learning from their a neighbor and another business owner, and she did really well because he was very positive and encouraging. And I think that's a good approach to take maybe in some situations as facilitator. But this is a great TED Talk, and even just the first little bit of it, if you were to just scan that QR code to save it for later. The other work I did in body mapping was to create a digital application. It's a web-based application involving drawing any pain, or since I focused more on acute pain. At the time I had like some chiropractic issues, so this diagram shows the chiropractic work, but wrote about, okay, there's a physiological approach in this kind of spiral diagram here. There's the psychosocial, theoretical, experiential, and using technology is a new type of approach where you're using like a digital iPad or a website. And other authors have written about this. Sarah Tycho in Bristol, UK. I think Sarah, you might be on this call, but she wrote about her work in virtual reality and body mapping. So really great use of the method with virtual reality. I did this body mapping app because I was waiting for my research ethics approval, and I was doing work with geriatric inpatients receiving daily hemodialysis therapy for end-stage kidney disease. So it's interesting, like I started experiencing like my own kidneys and maybe came back to that. But um, the patients drew by hand, pen and paper and crayons and stuff on a map to talk about their experiences of dialysis as they were going through dialysis. And before I was able to get into the unit to work with patients, I went through 2 research ethics boards, and there was a 6-month time period for that. So I think it was longer in that case because it was maybe mild to medium risk in levels of our research ethics. But um, in the meantime, I was wondering like, what is it like to do body mapping, and what about this, combining a web-based drawing app and an image of body and like keeping track of like sensations and dialysis. Um, so that work was published in 2020 in this collections of papers and chapters about body mapping and applying body mapping in research, an arts-based method. And that book is the first time that we talked about body mapping as a research method. So you can get that one, and there's a lot of really interesting papers in that about body mapping. In 2021, I spoke with the Canadian Association on Gerontology Student Connection about all about body mapping. So I thought I would share that link if you wanted to learn more about it. But from now, I'm going to shift over to digital storytelling a bit more and talk about the arts and impact of that on. Yeah, so wait a second to you can scan. Um, So I've done like this work for quite a long time, and honestly, when body mapping, I was invited to do body mapping, I thought, oh, I haven't done that for a while. But it's still now I really want to get back into it. So the question, like, so what? We all have bodies, we have embodied experiences. Sometimes we sometimes respond to stimuli in our environment, so things that are in our environment. And I think there's been a lot of work on physiological or physical aspects of body mapping, and not much about how the arts influence the practice. So, but there's been a lot of art about embodied experiences and, through history. So, the image on the right is a cover of the journal Ars Medica, Journal of Medicine, the Arts and Humanities. And it was by an artist that was at OCAD University, and they played this cello. You can kind of see like there's indentations on it, and it's really, really fascinating work. They created a mold of their torso and then created a wooden cello. So then you're technically hearing the sound of the shape of their body. So like it was really mind blowing. It still is. It's still really fascinating to think of that. And that's an artistic project, but it's really taking like a map of the person's body and playing the sound of like really multi-dimensional work. And in the spring last year, I attended a conference to present my work on actually the previous image, top middle image of visual memoing. So when I was practicing body mapping research, I was reflecting on my encounters with patients that I met and created like watercolor sketches as a way to kind of contain my kind of emotional response. And before doing that work, I was a volunteer for 4.5 years in the same place, but not in the dialysis unit. And so I had an understanding of being able to um, like to have a separation between myself as a volunteer and my everyday life. But doing the work in the unit was a more intense than that. And so I used my own art practice to reflect and called it visual memoing, and I've written a few pieces about that. But at the Sapienza University in Rome, Dr. Krista Harper at the University of Massachusetts Amherst spoke about her work in visual research, and I found that her slide here on future directions of visuality was quite compelling and encouraging for people doing visual based work. Um, and she spoke about the attention to outcomes and visualizing futures, design and multimodality, refusal and desire. Sorry, I think it's a typo, centered research. So I think that looking at how the arts influences body mapping and digital storytelling um, gives us an opportunity to think about like the future of this work. It's when you're combining arts and health, there's a lot of innovation that happens. And again, the research question will probably help you decide like what type of body mapping you will do. One of the exercises I did with students on the image, the video on the right, they talk about their research question with each other and then they switch to the next person. So it was kind of a fast way to talk about your research question and get some quick feedback. And this diagram here talks about different gaps in research and different, everyone has a research idea or an interest, but there may be certain types of research that you'll end up pursuing or combinations that can be supported with understanding the theoretical population gaps or different types of research gaps that you can contribute to. And at the graduate level, we're thinking of more about like what can we contribute our work to and how can we maybe in this talk, especially about the series of webinars about innovation, like how can we take our work and contribute in a way that will create social change. And so I think this it just didn't work because maybe the Wi-Fi, but that's okay. You get the idea. So in body mapping and digital storytelling, I thought about, okay, what are the standard equipment and materials lists and like how can we take this further? So body mapping, we usually have some brown craft paper that you can roll out on the floor and to the height of the person that's doing the map. Some paint, usually acrylic because it's not oil, it dries fast and it's bright colors. Brushes that are for acrylic paint, a bit thicker, palette knives, pencils, pens and markers to make the outline, masking tape to keep the paper on the floor to hold it up against the wall. So if people can't lay on the floor, you can put the paper against the wall and then you can trace them that way, help them do it themselves. Some people like to do it themselves and others don't. Jane Solomon has a guide about body mapping and how to do this this work. It's a really great guide. Digital storytelling, the materials are usually digital camera, video camera, or an iPad, iPhone, printed photographs that people bring to the workshop, and other personal memorabilia. A tripod to make sure that your camera's still in one place, or that you can a tripod on wheels sometimes you can use, and you can roll it so follow the person as they walk. and the resources are usually the same for both methods. You need some people to help like hold the paper, and same people to help hold the camera, and yeah, and so there's a bit of information sharing on how to do these things, how to edit video is part of the digital storytelling workshops usually. And so now I wanted to talk about like something to consider, like what other expressive techniques and tools do the arts offer for body mapping and digital storytelling researchers and practitioners to employ. This image on the right from the Aga Khan Museum shows that people have been drawing images of the body for a long time, for centuries. And why do artistic materials need to be limited to those lists? Can people do something? Can people do a body map for a whole week and every day, and so that they create a really um, you know, in-depth looking image that is more artful and has multiple levels of information and communication? And why do we need to sort of like limit that? So, and what's the future of those methods? You may wonder why there's a Power Rangers image, but I was reading about um, body um, body images by Gail Weiss from 1999. She wrote that images of the body always situated. So women's body, friend's body, Power Rangers, etc. So Power Rangers, she wrote about this, that it's a show from the early 90s. I loved it, but now I'm reading this book and wondering why was I so interested. She said that the figures very kind of similar in style, except the female figures tended to look to the male figures for assistance, um, when they were in situations in the show. Um, and this quote here: the internalization of representations of the female body by women is fundamental to the formation of female identity, but this process is not straightforward and unproblematic. It is by mapping the way in which the body circumscribes subjectivity that feminists can begin to describe how gender is constitutive of identity, while at the same time never determines it completely. And that's Lois in a 91 by Weiss. Little Power Rangers action there. So I think that it's true. The body is always situated, and body is not the same as body image. A body map is a body map. It's not the person. It's not their personality. It's one moment in time, and sometimes, particularly examples from work in HIV/AIDS, people would come back to their body map and add to it, so that you can give a sense that it's changing. But I haven't seen any work in body mapping with animation. I guess the closest would be more virtual reality work where you're seeing parts of the person injected into the image. And but there are other techniques in the arts. Wangechi Mutu uses really refined collage. She's a Kenyan artist, and you may have seen some of her exhibits. I've explored pastel. Soft pastel gives you the chance to really emphasize color vibration in the bottom left image. Um, that image is talking about being black, queer, and woman, and the tensions involved with that. Um, and photography can be a really interesting way to do a time-based um, sequence. There's no reason I think why a time-based work couldn't be called a body map, because if it's involving an exploration of concerns of the body. Marigold Santos, amazing artist, on the right, image of a figure in space. I don't know what, I can't remember what it's called. I just took the image from her show, but it's um, using the idea of ribbon and texture and depth perception and covering face. Maybe that's saying something about person's story in that sense. In South Africa, I went to Constitution Hill and saw Gandhi's jail cell, and they had these images of Gandhi at various points in his life, writing and sitting, and so that display of images and a layered experience was something that actually they explored in I think it's called the Big Anxiety Festival in Sydney, Australia, and they had panels of body outlines from body maps and presented them in that way. So the way that you present the body map too um, can be discussed with participants, but also considered in part of your research as like answering that gap in knowledge. Jamil Finney, really like compelling images of the figure. And then my image there with a boy singing. He wanted to buy a Coke and hit his hand against his chest. So while he sang, and it creates that reverb. And yeah, so that was like an embodied, powerful experience. And I captured that through like the witnessing and I don't really know how this one connects to body mapping, but it's the experience that is there. Um, Something else I discovered was called Lukasa memory boards, and that's this image in the middle. Um, and they're created to remind people of family and their historical objects and African kings and queens and pathways to get to certain places. So they use beads to mark um, like different events and things like that. So I think it's really neat to think it looks almost like a phone that we would use and have different apps, but this is more information about a whole community experience. So and there's other possibilities to think about embodiment and storytelling through Afrofuturist perspectives. This book, Making Africa a Continent of Contemporary Design, African Prints and Fashion, is really interesting book you can check out. And so here, maybe people in your workshops are interested in fashion and the placement of different textiles on their body map would have a significance to the story about their body. Um, and on the right is two images I created about a all black ballet in memory of George Floyd. And so having a ball of clay and you give to the participant and they can create a body and in a position that is meaningful and tell a story through that. So that's a possibility. In the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, Rebecca Belmore created this huge sculpture with handprints, so you can see like she's squished the clay into in her hand. There's been some work in body mapping with hand mapping. So this would be a physical version of it. I'm not saying to do the same thing, but using the movement of the body to create a physical object is quite interesting too. Um, Adam Pendleton also creates like images of portraits and face images. In London, I went to see this sculpture at the Royal Academy of Arts, and it's called The First Supper, and it's images of Black figures in history, and so there's another sculptural kind of idea of embodied storytelling. Hans Holbein, the younger, created this image, really like amazing image it's at the National Gallery. It's a huge canvas and has a huge, big, thick black frame around it, an ornate frame. But as you see in the bottom area, a distorted skull. And that was actually original to the work. If you haven't seen this before, in an art history book or anything, but So they're commenting on, what they do and how they got to where they are, and the understanding of the passing of time and life, end of life. And something I've been thinking about more recently is the topic of loss and grief and dementia, and creating works about those topics of ambiguous loss and not knowing, um, what's happening, but knowing the person is still there. So that's more current work, and the images on the right is charcoal. So charcoal gives you the effect of it's dark, very dark, and then you can take it away using an eraser. And so the white areas are parts that have been erased. And so just that idea, the theoretical idea of like taking things away from the darkness to create a form is really maybe healing for participants that are using that medium. There's been some more futuristic pieces, like the artist on the left was from the Hot Dogs Film Festival art exhibit. You can wear that object that they made, and you can see through certain parts of it. So it's an object that people could make in a workshop to change their perception of what they see. Or Euphoria is a really cool 3D graphic artist based in Montreal, and does images for concerts and for I can't remember the music, the band, but anyway, there's other ways of using lighting and projection. The diagram on the right is something I created in 2009 about creating a healing space. It's a concept that comes from hospitals and healthcare, where people can go and feel calm, or feel change their sense of their body by using using color or light projection. And the three dots, green, blue, and red, can be controlled using a mouse, like a keyboard, sorry, up, down, left arrow, and then it moves the light to that color. So you could come, if participants are, or if you're interested in computer science work, you can bring that to even though if you're doing a master in program in like health studies, but you have a computer science background, or bring those together and try to give people that experience of changing how their health care experiences with color and light, maybe. Digital storytelling, I'm realizing the time is coming up, but so digital storytelling is creating a story about a personal lived experience. I kind of talked about storytelling and digital storytelling in the same, you know, with body mapping, but digital stories are usually created in video format and can be created with any digital format or tool, such as a cell phone, tablet, camera, or computer. And some of them focus on advocacy, and in these situations, the digital stories can be shared to influence public policy. And my colleague, friend Lavinia, and I, we were going to do a workshop series. We're going to do it again in the next few months. So if you're interested to do a workshop on digital storytelling, please reach out. Lavinia has been sick, so we're going to get back together and do that together someday. But the digital storytelling technique came from an artist who was interested in exploring how to use the old iMac computer with video making software and image making software. And that method was taken up by Joe Lambert in California, and he's since then established what's called the Story Center. And you can go to storycenter.org and learn about all of those work and see some examples of stories. Daniel Meadows took the workshop and brought the method to the BBC, where they had a program to help people tell their stories in the UK on the BBC, which was in novel at the time in the 90s. So these are some examples I usually show in a digital storytelling workshop with different types of digital stories. So there's just not time to show all of them today. This was from a graduate student, and AI and automation story map. So a story map is using digital storytelling and geographic mapping to explain how one concept got to another concept. This was an interactive story project with students that created digital stories about the pandemic and what it's like to be in lockdown. Usually, most of those stories topics. So there's a few story centers across around the world that have developed the method. Storycenter.ca, storycenter.org, R and the E are in different places, but they do the same kind of method approach. There's Bold Stories in Italy. Museu da Pessoa in Brazil was one of the first centers. The Museum of the Person, and Digital Stories in New Zealand. So there are what's called the 7 steps to digital storytelling. And these are some questions that the facilitator can ask participants about who is your audience is a key question. Owning your emotions. In my work, I found that emotion is really important in great storytelling. You can have, think of Oscar-winning movies that you like, and one of the key points is the audience, and you like it because you like it, and it connects to your life, and also it connects to certain emotions that you have experienced or that you're currently experiencing. And then sometimes it's helpful to find a moment to talk about in a story because it helps you to just create one story. You're not creating a life story in digital storytelling. You're creating one story, and then that's helping you ultimately understand yourself and your experiences. See the story and watch it and listen to it, and listen to your voiceover and assembly, putting it all together. Usually you write a story, it's around 250 to 375 words, 20 images. Yeah, and so thinking of the arts and body mapping and digital storytelling, I'm wondering in our discussion, or unless there's other more interesting questions, is how can researchers interested in body mapping and digital storytelling discover ways to expand these techniques? So one thing I think you can do is look at art on a regular basis to train yourself in observation about artfulness and expression. If you're in graduate school, I think the majority of the audience in this session is thinking about your first year of your program, and you're talking to your supervisor like what you're interested to do. And I want to encourage you, if you're interested in arts-based research, to go experience live artistic performances and think about how that connects to your social science work. Create art as a form of reflection and reflecting on your encounters, and also as a practice. And create art about embodied experiences if you're interested in doing body mapping, or about storied experiences if you're interested in storytelling. And notice what you see around you. Like this is image on the right from a cafe of a forest person with a lot of people inside the image, I think, helping to make the coffee plant. So, but it's maybe something that you could do with participants at a workshop, and have images that they have of themselves on a timeline throughout their life, and put it all together in a collage and to explain who they are today, right? So you can kind of get inspiration from wherever you are, like art and image of the person there with the field and leaves and a thinking, and so maybe that's the kind of body map someone will make. Another question is, how can we merge material corporeal explorations of selfhood storytelling and embodiment with two-dimensional work and using so this is when I took like three-dimensional sublimation printing on fabric and created collage of like textiles from all of my culture for my graduation, and create how can you create something meaningful that's embodied and like sort of a map of who you are, but subtle, it's like fashion or and then finally, a researcher of arts-based methods, I think, is also a practitioner, and you're not just using the arts. So you got to practice and notice and document and create art because it's an expression. It's the opposite of depression. That's what Dr. Edith Eger said in The Gift. She's a Holocaust survivor and wrote about expressing rather than depressing it. Indentation. Art is an expression. If you look at this mural, it's a family and it's a community and it's keeping people together in that community too by seeing the mural. It doesn't mean it has to be perfect. It's, there's the darker part of the wall on the far end there. It maybe doesn't look, perfect, but it has, a sense that it's there and has a presence. So that's very valuable to and I just skipped that slide, but I think it's businesses need storytellers and stories. This is from the World Economic Forum Job Futures Report, and creative thinking, analytical thinking, curiosity, and lifelong learning. So being curious of your surroundings and being creative is a need for work. And so how can we and do we think of research with the arts as being influenced by the arts and not simply using it? So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I learned a lot from that topic. Since we have 5 minutes left, if anyone have a question to ask in the chat, or you can just raise your hand and ask your question directly. We'll just give everyone a few seconds to type if they have any question. Okay, so I think we have one. So thank you for the interesting presentation. My question is, can body mapping stand alone as a single research method, or it should be accompanied, I cannot say that word, combined with other methods?
I was thinking of this. I think now that it's considered a research method, and there's a lot of literature that it's a research method, the techniques that you use to apply the method and include things like interviews. So the techniques that you use in interviewing as a method are used in body mapping. So yes, it could be considered a single research method. You may need to do some work to explain that that's true. Providing like sources about body mapping as its own thing. Often it's combined with interviewing or focus groups or that kind of technique or observation, but those techniques are all woven into the method now. So it's an interesting question. I think, in research, social science research particularly, we often are pushed to triangulate our methods, like use three together, but it's not always necessary.
Any other question before we end this session? Oh. I think we have a question. You can, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was really interesting. I was participating in the course when you first talked with us about body mapping, but it's interesting to see how you took the broader stance of combining just arts and combining body mapping and digital storytelling together. And I find it really inspirational that I don't find myself feeling like I have that arts-based I guess, inclination right off the hop for research. And so you mentioned that people can create art as a form of reflexivity or reflexive practice, and that it might be one way to get a little bit more comfortable or familiar. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts or guidance for people that are new to arts-based research, where might we start?
Yeah, thanks. It's great to know you were there, the first one in 2021. And it was definitely a challenge, like how to combine body mapping and digital storytelling. But I go to what I know, and that's art. And if it's new to somebody and practicing, especially with artistic materials that are, if you're used to using a black marker, and maybe you want to explore something that has a softness to it, like charcoal, but then how do you teach other people to do that if you haven't, really used it? So you could get like a sketchbook or get some basic materials. A lot of art stores have a range of like beginner to advanced level materials, and a lot of the staff are practicing artists themselves, and so they can like advise you on that. Some art material websites, they have guides on how to use materials too. So maybe you're interested in watercolor painting, but not acrylic because it's like thicker, and so maybe you want to try it, and they have um, instructional guides sometimes on how to do that. And also, if you're not living near like an art store, like a good quality art store, then you can order things on their website or get some information like that. And sometimes paper places have like a $20 bag of like small pieces of paper you can take for making collages. And um yeah, and just like I think just try it on a, make a few abstract lines and write down what it was that you did, so that you can come back to it and maybe have a sketchbook, like a sketchbook, and just put all of that into there, so it's like your technique book. And then you can come back and look at that and say, I've tried this technique, and this was a dark line in the charcoal, and now I took the eraser here, and that type of eraser works better than that one. So you can kind of create your own, like, yeah, maybe that would be a good way to try it. That could also create like, you could share that in a small group with other people that are doing the similar thing. Um, and, you know, reflect, um, maybe start this techniques like a self-portrait, or drawing like a group of people in your family or your friends, and you're at like a pub together, and just take a napkin and just do a sketch, like, reflect on the moment, and then come back to your place and draw like a nicer picture. Yeah, so just make sure it's an ongoing practice, just like people say writing and reflection. So writing is an ongoing practice, and so is art. It's quite underfunded, so it's, not always available. How body mapping is done, you need a certain standard tool. I think would be useful to look at that other presentation I did on body mapping. I can share that link in our chat just so you have it. There is a guide by Jane Solomon, and it's really great. And how people use virtual realities. So the person that does virtual reality and body mapping is Sarah Pico. And Sarah has the software and design for that. She would be great to reach out to, like on LinkedIn, maybe.
So I think that's the end of today's session. Thank you so much again for your presentation. And just as a reminder, for week 5, so next week, we'll discuss the topic of storytelling. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again. Yeah. Have a good rest of your day.